Let's go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Zephyr's Adjusted for Risk podcast from the shores of Lake Tahoe. There are over 70 million baby boomers who are currently retired or about to retire. And because of that, it is very important for financial advisors to plan for their clients' transition to retirement. Well, I have the perfect guest on who can help us understand these retirement strategies and share some insights into his unique approach to retirement planning. But first, today's episode is sponsored by the award-winning Zephyr, which helps investment professionals make more informed investment decisions. All right, enough from me. Let's go ahead and get started and bring on the star of the show. I'd like to give a very warm welcome to Frank Legan. Frank is a financial advisor at SEIA. Frank, thank you so much for coming on. It's an honor to have you on. Now, can you please tell us a little bit more about yourself and SEIA?
Ryan, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. This is quite a treat. 52 years old, been in the business for over 25 years, started in 2000, and desk, a phone, and a chair, had to make something from nothing back in the day, and have been trying to earn it and find my place in this business since the very, very beginning.
Yeah, fantastic. It's amazing how it's changed, right? I've been in the industry for 20 some years and started in operations of, Wirehouse, and just amazing, with the tubes, dropping tickets and stuff like that. Amazing how it's changed over the years.
Yeah, it's changed a lot.
Yes. Wealth management space, it has evolved greatly over the years. So too has retirement planning for individuals. Like when we started, there wasn't, most advisors, they were brokers. There wasn't a whole lot of financial planning being done. That's really changed now, where majority of advisors now are offering some type of financial plan. With over 70 million baby boomers, like I mentioned earlier, already in retirement or about to retire, it's important to understand how retirement's evolved. How do you believe it's evolved over the years?
It's interesting, Ryan. I just wrote an article about this, that it's not 1995 anymore, and we should start planning for retirement like it's not. Okay. So there used to be this arbitrary shut it down at 65, and I think a lot of that just had to do with that's when full Social Security were available for people, and we weren't living as long as we are today. So that might have been preparation for maybe a 15 or 20-year period of time, with Social Security, perhaps a pension being a part of the equation. And that's less and less true today. As people are living so much longer, we have to prepare for that. Sequence of return risk is a real thing, and very important when you're embarking on a 25 or 30-year, perhaps even 40-year period of time. And we found that people are definitely working longer. Not necessarily mean that they're working in the same grinded out, stressful kind of position that they made their career in. A lot of phasing out of work is something that we notice, where people want to do things that are maybe meaningful to them, less stressful, and phasing their way through to kind of drive what retirement might look like. So it's definitely evolved and changed a lot over the years.
Yeah, fantastic. In part of the evolution, years ago, 4% was there was that earmark, 4% annual withdrawal rate. And I've done some research on it back when interest rates were at 1%. Does that 4% annual withdrawal rate, does that still work when interest rates are still low? Now interest rates are higher, that 4% is a little bit easier to accomplish and handle on an annual basis. But should we move past that? Does it really work today? If not, what's a better approach than that 4% annual withdrawal rate?
Yeah, I think it's still a helpful benchmark. It's especially easy to achieve when you have 3 years in the market, like just experienced, right? 23, 24, and 25 have been really good years in the market. And so that certainly makes it easier. But our focus is really more on the sequence of return risk.
Okay.
Because if you start retirement in 2022 and the S&P is down 18% and the aggregate bond index is
Yep.
down 13%, if you're taking 4% out, all of a sudden now your deficit is greater than 20%. And to get back to par is very difficult from
Yep.
there. You really need significant equity-like returns in order to get back to par. So love the idea of segmenting money, um, bucketing money together. First year or two worth of spending set aside in cash-like investments,
Yep.
call it years 3 to 7, and something a little bit more bond-like, so that you can just let your long-term money, your equity money, do what we know that it does over the course of time. But we're not so worried about the short term and what we might be waking up to or what somebody might be posting on social media or saying to move markets.
Yeah. Yeah, that bucket approach, it's a popular one and a prudent one, how and plus I think too with markets the way they are, they move quicker than ever. It's nice to have some cash on the sideline too to, take advantage of some sell-off, some market volatility if you can as a client. And so there's, different benefits I think to that bucket approach.
I think so too, Ryan. I think it leads to better outcomes in the sense that when things are going sideways or not going well and it just doesn't feel good, clients are more inclined to stick it out long term with their equity investments, knowing that their cash needs are being met and that it's not going to impact cash flow in the short term, in the here and now. So I think it definitely keeps clients stickier to their plan as a result of that when we go through difficult times.
That's important to stay true to your plan, right? That conviction part. We'll get to it later about mistakes that, investors make during retirement. I'm assuming that's one of them is deviating from that plan. Yeah. You know, Reports show that there's a retirement crisis in America. You know, like you said earlier, people are living longer than ever and they don't have enough savings. When we started years ago, people had pensions that they could rely on. Well, few people now have access to pensions or, they don't take advantage of employer-based retirement accounts like a 401k. A lot of firms offer them, but it's kind of surprising if you look at the statistics that there's a fair amount of people that don't take advantage of it. And finally, Social Security is uncertain. We read the headlines. Who knows when it's going to go dry? But what are 3 steps that can help modernize a retirement plan, giving all that uncertainty and in the modern day of retirement?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. I will say, though, that I think that the millennials are doing a really good job. I think that they've gotten the message from their parents and grandparents about, early and often and in terms of saving for retirement. So I think there's hope. It's not completely bleak. So I would say number one, Ryan, I love the idea of the exercise, my life without regard to money. And I say that because it really focuses us on thinking about the things and the people that are most important to us. Because at the end of the day, when we achieve financial independence, we want to do the things that we love the most with the people that we love the most.
Okay.
And I think that's such a motivating thing to think of your future self and what you want it to look like, the things that you want to be doing and the people that you want to be doing them with as a motivator in terms of planning. So that's number one.
Okay.
Number two, retirement really is a pretty simple math problem in the sense that at some point in time, you're not going to work anymore. And your income, the money that you need to cover your expenses, needs to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
And part of that Social Security, part of that perhaps a pension, but most likely not for most people. The rest is going to come from your family incorporated. And it's just really important to know what that nest egg number needs to be for you to achieve the kind of life that you want, that you dreamed of in the first step. And then number three, strongly encourage folks to work with a professional, with an advisor who does this for a living that can help guide them through, answer their questions about how much they should be putting away, what's the most appropriate allocation for you. And when the inevitable surprises or changes come in life, you have a sounding board and hopefully you have a plan that you can adapt to reflect those different circumstances.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I love that last point about using a professional. There's a lot of online, you speak of evolution, a lot of online applications now, whether it's just a day trade, right? Being able to trade and invest, but there's calculators out there and stuff like that that people might think, hey, I can just use this, but it's not enough, right? You need
I think
that.
that the stakes are too high, Ryan. I think
Yeah.
if you're planning a trip, great. If you if you want to know the best place to eat or adventures to have if you're traveling, it's great. But you only get one chance.
Yeah.
You don't get a do-over. You don't get to do it again. There's not a retirement loan that you can take out. The stakes are just too high. And so I think working with somebody that really gets you and understands you and has done this for a while is really helpful. You think of the top athletes, the top executives, the high achieving people in our society, they all generally have coaches. They have people that help them through. And so I think that's a great example of just other people in life who that we might put on a pedestal or look up to for their success and know that
Yeah.
they use coaches. They don't have all the answers themselves.
Yeah. Very good point. I knew, and still, there's some financial advisors that I talk to a lot. They actually have financial advisors, right? So it gives them, they look outside the box, and so they're not biased and stuff like that to help them. So that kind of goes to the point of everyone uses a financial advisor. Even financial advisors use financial advisors.
Definitely.
So I think that's a good point starting, changes subject to your approach to retirement planning. You take more of a human-centric approach. Might be a little bit different than the traditional, complete data, goals-oriented approach. You take more of a human-centric approach. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how it differs than most other approaches?
Yeah. I think when people think about people like us, they think about the numbers first and mostly.
Yeah.
Tell me when you want to retire, how much you need to live on, and we'll do the math and help you figure out how to get there. And it's not that isn't important because it is, but those conversations are pretty hollow and they don't tell me anything about who you are as a human being, as a husband, a father, a
Mhm.
professional, whatever it is that you do in your life, those things that you love the most and the people that you love the most, right? And in order for a plan to truly reflect you as the individual that you are, we need to know those things. And aligning your resources with those values, with those wishes for the future is really important. And so we start all of our conversations in that way, as opposed to a data discovery meeting where we're just collecting statements, figuring out allocations, where money is, that sort of thing.
Mhm. When you're doing that, so instead of a data collection meeting, what are, and without giving away your secret sauce here, what are, some of the first questions that you ask that you think are most important? Now, obviously, the questions are important, but listening is more important. But what are some of the popular questions you ask during that initial process?
So what we're trying to get to is we want to know if you're awake at 2 o'clock in the morning, what are you afraid of? What are you thinking? Is it inflation? Is it your health? Is it your kids, your parents, losing your job? What is it? And that's about dangers. So dangers are about the fear of losing something. And the idea there is where we want to add value is we want to do our best to try to solve or mitigate those dangers on behalf of our clients. The second part we would call opportunities. And opportunities are about the things that you're excited about. So if your dangers are solved, it frees you up back to the earlier my life without regard to money exercise. It's exciting. It's very motivating. And then the third we would call strengths. And strengths are the things that we're already doing that we might not be giving ourselves credit for. We often find that people are too hard on themselves and they don't give themselves credit for some of the good things that they're doing.
Hmm.
But that could just be a solid job, a great network, you're a good saver, your spend is reasonable, you're not living above your means. Um, that's essentially the equation that we're trying to solve for our clients. And so I would say my favorite question, though, this comes from Dan Sullivan, strategic coach. He's a friend and mentor, is Ryan, let's say that you and I are sitting here, same place 3 years from now.
Okay.
What needs to happen between now and then for you to feel comfortable and confident with where you are in your life? And that question to me is either a magnet or a filter for the kind of people that
Okay.
we want to be working with, in the sense that if they're willing to engage with you and talk both personally and financially, the answer to that question, it's going to be a good fit client.
Yeah.
Um, And it just forces them to see their bigger future and to tell you what that looks like.
Well, that is a really good question. And like you say, I talk to a lot of financial advisors, and one of the things that they talk about is work with people that you enjoy working with. So that's a great two-sided question there, right? That, like you said, it filters out, is this a good prospect, a good client, and, find out more about them. I'm assuming too, like you said at the earlier, when a potential client or a client sits down with a financial advisor, like you said, oh gosh, we're going to be talking about numbers and money and things that maybe they don't want to talk about. But your approach probably gets them to open up, and it's probably a little relieving to them versus just having a bunch of numbers thrown at them.
We try to make it very comfortable in that way. I have a colleague from years ago who used to say that as advisors, we end up with the clients that we deserve. And what he meant by that was if you are a numbers first person and that's your passion and what you're good at, you'll attract clients that like that, that are looking for that in an advisor. I can't hug a spreadsheet. I'd like to be able to do that to begin or end a meeting, is to be very friendly, enjoy the walk to and from the conference room, right?
Yeah.
I want to be thinking about them when we're not together. And an approach like this, I think, just leads to better conversations. I think it leads to better outcomes. And certainly for me personally, it just leads to a better experience as an advisor, where when the phone rings, I'm looking at the number and I'm not cringing thinking, oh gosh, I just don't want to take this call. And we've all been there in the
Right.
beginning, right? You say yes to everybody because you're trying to make it. And sometimes we have to learn the hard way the difference between a good and bad fit, regardless of the revenue being generated or the assets that you're managing on their behalf.
Yeah. Let's stick with that from the financial advisor practice, a business management practice. Does, obviously financial planning, it makes that relationship stronger with the client. It makes it stickier. If you're just managing money, it's really easy to transfer money between different financial advisors and custodians and so on. Does your approach make it a lot stickier, like that relationship a lot stronger versus just a basic data driven approach?
It absolutely does. Clients that begin with a financial plan are much more likely to be with you for the long term because you've created that framework for the rest of their life with them that they could easily adapt to, that we could easily update and adjust without too much heavy lifting and go through it together. So one of the things that I think about often is, this is a Dan Sullivan thing too, is the idea of measuring backwards. So
Okay.
if you think about your ideal future, you're always looking out to the horizon. And by definition, ideal is perfect. So it's unachievable. And if you're measuring yourself against that perfection in the future, it can often lead to anxiety, frustration, like, God, I wish I was there. But if you measure backwards and you look back to maybe where you were in your life a year ago, 3 years ago, goodness, think of how far we've come since COVID. It grounds you. And so going through that exercise with clients through the financial planning process, it builds confidence and it builds trust because you could cite the examples of remember when you lost your job and you weren't expecting that to happen and look how you rebounded and what life looks like. Or somebody unexpectedly passed away, fill in the blank for things that can happen that are just really difficult and tough. And clients are resilient and have been through hard times before. They've overcome obstacles before. And that shared experience is trust building and confidence building for the people that we work with.
Fantastic. Let's talk about some strategies here and get a little bit more specific. So, one of the most popular financial planning goals for parents is to help their children with college expenses. Everyone talks about it. Is planning for college changing? We see the headline, college is getting more and more expensive. Some people are like, is it worth it? Is planning for college changing, and how do you handle it?
Ryan, I'm so glad you asked this because this has come up more and more. My daughter just graduated from college in May, so we just went through this personally. But what's coming up more and more in conversations with clients, particularly those with younger children, is college still going to be a thing in the way that it has been traditionally? So the last conversation that I had with clients about this was a couple weeks ago. They're late 30s. They have an 8-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they've been full on contributing to 529s based on what we think college will cost in the future.
Yeah.
And it caused them to pause and say, do we still want to go with this strategy? Knowing that with AI, with the cost of college
Yeah.
and just the evolving workplace, maybe there's an Amazon university in the future or a, NVIDIA university in the future where they find young and promising people and educate them based on the skill set that's necessary for their businesses. Absolutely. I think the old playbook is being challenged. I don't have a crystal ball to know how this is going to play out, but I think all of us just talking with buddies and family members and stuff, it's something has to give. The cost is just
Yeah.
so astronomical, and you could just really leave there very burdened with debt and in a deficit right out of the gate. And it can be really difficult to overcome that slow and painful start.
Yeah, you're exactly correct. And those first couple jobs, unless maybe you're a doctor, some lawyer or
Yeah.
something like that, those first couple jobs, the salaries aren't going to be high enough to really make a dent in those loans. So it's a very good point. You mentioned 529 plans. Do you think, you know, going aging myself here, back when I started, 529 plans were so popular, so all the rave, and has that changed some? Has now, whether it's college planning or just saving now for your children, are people going
Well,
more flexible with that?
well, in terms of the benefits, Ryan, there's a bunch. Obviously, saving for college in the traditional way, I don't know that there's a better way to do it than 529. Now that you're able to use that money to pay for private, primary, middle, and high school,
Mhm.
that's attractive. And from an estate planning standpoint, being able to gift 5 years worth of the annual gift exclusion all at once, remove that money from a client's estate and they still maintain control of it, where it can really become a multi-generational tool for school in the future. So I think there are still a lot of really good benefits to it. But I think the issue is that if we ever hear pushback, it's just based on rigidity. It's that,
Okay.
what if I want this money so that my child could buy a home in the future or start a business or fill in the blank for what that might be? Or what if college isn't a path for them? What if they're interested in another path? And I think you have to consider all of those different things before determining what's the most appropriate avenue for each client.
Yep. Great advice, Frank, and insight there. Lastly, you talked about earlier, we kind of mentioned about mistakes. You hate to end the conversation talking about the bad things, but
Yeah.
what's one of the biggest mistakes investors make as they enter retirement?
Changing, first of all, just getting out. If you have a good plan and you have an appropriate allocation, you just, you can't. People that did that in April are kicking themselves today.
Yeah.
People that did that during COVID are kicking themselves today. Just, they've cost themselves so much.
Mhm.
I think that's the single biggest thing. And then the others would just be overspending,
Okay.
spending beyond your means. Or those are two big ones.
Yeah. And like you said, sequence risk, right? It kind of goes along with selling when times maybe are going sideways and you get out, and then all of a sudden you bring in sequence risk, which maybe is a risk that people don't think of often enough, but it's arguably the biggest risk to a retirement plan.
It definitely is. That's why it's just so important that clients are allocated appropriately. Everything sounds good right now, right? Like
Yeah.
you can talk about it, but once you get punched in the stomach, once you experience a downturn, that's the best teacher. And that's the
Mhm.
exact moment when a client knows whether they're allocated in a way that's comfortable for them or not. It's really important for us as advisors to figure that out before that moment comes because we know it will, right? There's
Yeah.
always going to be a hard time. We're never going to know when. We're never necessarily going to know why We'll come up with a fun name for whatever it is that we're going through. But it's one of the most important jobs for us as advisors is to figure out that level of risk that a client is willing or not willing to take. So when we go through the next hard time, which we know we will, we want them to stay invested and we want them to stick it out with us.
Frank, fantastic conversation. Great insight. Very useful conversation and insight. You provide a different way of looking at retirement planning and why it's important to, take that human-centric approach. Great. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It was really a pleasure to have you on. Where can our audience get more information about SEIA and your practice?
SEIA.com. I have a personal website, which is franklegan.com. Welcome to do that. And we'd love to chat. This has been so much fun, Ryan. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Frank. And thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Zephyr's Adjusted for Risk podcast. You can watch all of our other episodes on the Zephyr YouTube channel and on Spotify. Please remember to like and subscribe to those channels and follow us on LinkedIn. Thank you and have a great rest of your week.